you should consider seriously the possibility that you are 10 times as good as your competitors in at least part of what you do. And you should not rest until you have found a way of getting paid in accordance with that.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
Man, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Jennings Executive Search. I had a great conversation with John Jennings about the skills needed in different pricing roles. He and I think a lot alike. If you're looking for a new pricing role, or if you're trying to hire just the right pricing person, I strongly suggest you reach out to Jennings Executive Search. They specialize in placing pricing people. Say that 3 times fast. Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the imperfect relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving, and I run boot camps to help companies get paid more. Our guest today is Alastair Dryburgh. Hopefully I got that right.
Yeah.
Here are 3 things you learn about Alastair before we start. He's the chief pricing architect at Intelligent Pricing Architecture. He's been running this for 4 years now. He's the author of the new book, Pricing Genius. And believe it or not, he is the only chartered accountant who's done a radio interview, on the topic of nuclear waste dumping. Welcome, Alastair.
Lovely to be here. Thanks for the invite.
It's going to be fun. So how did you get into pricing?
Well, it goes back quite a long time. This was 1994. I'd been working for the Pearson Group, a big media group, and I became commercial director of one of their subsidiaries. And this company was a marketing consultancy. It served the pharmaceutical industry. And our big thing was, you're a pharmaceutical industry, you're about to launch what you hope is going to be a major new drug globally. And what we would do is we would dig through all your clinical trial results and see what sort of marketing messages we could pull out from them that could be backed up scientifically. So you might be able to claim, we have clinical evidence that our product is the product of choice if the patient has kidney failure. And then we would write scientific articles to go in respected peer-reviewed journals to support these marketing claims. So you actually get, proper published scientific support for your marketing, which is pretty powerful if you're a pharmaceutical company. And we were getting along okay. It was a difficult business to run, though, because we employed people who had PhDs in life science and really understood pharmaceutical marketing. Very rare combination, as you can imagine. And it suddenly struck me, I woke up very early one morning, that here we are, we're working with these companies. They've invested hundreds of millions in these new products, getting them to the point of being launched. The difference between launching them well and becoming number 1 in the category and launching them badly and becoming number 4 is probably worth billions over the life cycle of the product. So we were in a similar position to, say, a big investment bank advising on some huge merger or acquisition with vast amounts at stake. And so I asked myself, why are we not as rich and powerful as Goldman Sachs, but instead spend our time arguing about the cost of an individual illustration with some junior product manager? And it was that made me realize just how powerful and valuable professional services can be. I moved on from that company. I did various other CFO jobs, then became an independent consultant, and I was doing business growth advice originally. But I realized that pricing was almost always the most important lever that we could find to pull, and that the consultancies and creative agencies, the people I call the creative and the ingenious people, were the ones I seemed to resonate with most. So I basically just narrowed down my focus to those. So I now do pricing strategies principally, almost exclusively for creative agencies and consultancies.
You know what I find fascinating about the story you told, and by the way, I skimmed your book, which is very interesting. And you and I think a ton alike, but what's really fun is we use the word pricing a lot, but it really isn't about pricing. It's always about value. And so I'm going to let you riff on that line a little bit. What do you think? Is it really value or is it pricing?
I think it's value, and it's the one of the ways I talk about it is it's about value, and if you want to use strategy speak, it's about value capture, not value creation. I mean, to explain that in rather more straightforward language, an analogy I use is I ask you, for instance, what is more important to you, oxygen or coffee? That's not a trick question. Oxygen,
Yeah,
obviously. Um,
of course.
yeah. And then I ask, okay, well, how much did you spend on oxygen in the last month compared to how much you spent on coffee? And unless you're a scuba diver or you've spent time in hospital on connected to oxygen, the answer probably is you spent a lot more money on coffee. So why are you and everybody else spending so much more on something that you've just said is less valuable, less important to you? And it's because you have to, because the oxygen is available for free everywhere, pretty much. The coffee has to be paid for. And so that's another way of looking at this question of value capture. It's possible that you are creating vast amounts of value for your clients, but actually being able to capture to be paid for a tiny, tiny little fraction of that, which I would argue is an injustice.
Yep. So I often think about, and I describe this a lot, as a will I decision and a which one decision. And so I want to use your example. And so, will I breathe today? Yes, I will breathe today. Right. So, which oxygen am I going to breathe? Well, I'll take the free stuff that's around me. So, will I have a cup of coffee today? Yeah, probably. And so, which one am I going to have? And so now I'm making a which one decision, and I don't get free coffee. I have to buy it someplace. And so now I'm trying to choose which coffee do I want. So, how do you apply this to a consultant or to a creative person?
Right, and this is, I think, one of the big issues that the consultants and the creative people have is that if you know something about value-based pricing, and I think most of those guys are at least superficially familiar with it, you can answer the client's "will I" question. Will I do something in this area? Will I get a consultancy to improve this? Will I get an ad agency to help me sell more of that? And you talk about the value of doing that, and with a bit of practice, you can get good at communicating the value that you're going to bring. But the problem is that gets you to the point where you might actually get the client even more excited about doing this piece of work because you've opened their eyes to some other areas of value that you're going to be creating, which is great. But then when you get to the which one decision, that's where it goes wrong because if you can't demonstrate that you have not just that you can create value, but you can do something unique that they can't get from someone else, then they may well think, yep, it would make sense to pay these guys $100,000 to do this piece of work. But there's these other people who appear exactly the same who say they'll do it for 50. And at that point, as a client, I'd be almost irresponsible to choose the much higher fee if I haven't got any proof that it will actually produce not just the result but a superior result.
Yeah, I think that's a great example or a great comment. And so the question is, how do you do that, right? Everybody's looking to say, hey, as a consultant, I'm different than that consultant.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
what's really the driving factor there?
yeah, right. I mean, this is something that's handled really, really badly. I think about I know somebody who has a business, and his business is effectively matching up creative agencies, marketing firms with clients. And it's interesting that this whole choice needs someone to do it, to help them. And he says quite often they get a brief come in from a client, they want a particular piece of work, and there is, quote, no obvious agency. Um, which obviously doesn't help when you come to it comes when it comes to the point of pricing, because you want to be in a position where the client is thinking, oh right, these guys can do this thing for me and nobody else can. You know, I have a friend who's doing some another organizational development consultant. Was doing a piece of work with a big law firm in his city, and he said to me, he mentally thought his way along Colmore Road, which is the street where all the big law firms have their offices. And he went to all these firms' websites, pulled off the homepage of the website, blanked out the names, put them all together in a document, and said to his client, can you tell which one of these homepages belongs to which one of these firms? Can you even pick out yourselves? And they couldn't. I mean, it is a huge, huge problem. Everybody looks so similar, but it doesn't have to be that way. And the way I generally advise people to deal with this is to talk about their proprietary process. So this is an idea I originally stole from McKinsey and Co., which is probably not a bad place to steal consulting ideas from.
Probably not.
Yeah. So I had a client, a digital marketing agency, and they were doing something which was went under the very unsexy name of gap analysis, and it was a strategic analysis. And my client described it to me, and I said, Simon, this is huge. You are identifying entirely new markets for your clients. They were looking on social media and they were finding these large groups of people who were talking about things that nobody was saying anything useful about. They were asking questions that nobody was giving any particular good answers to. So here were this huge new, completely untapped markets for their client, and he was selling it, as I said, for 3, 4, £5,000. So we looked at the way he was actually doing it and the process he was going through, and we identified that there were 7 steps to it, and it wasn't hard to make each step begin with C. So it turned into the 7 C's process: customer, channel, competition, commercials, and a few others. And based on that, he was able to get the fee from a few thousand to 25,000 and then to 46,000, because he was now demonstrating, well, several things actually. If we've got the process worked out, we've obviously done this quite a lot of times. We've got experience, which means there's a high chance that will actually produce a success for you. And nobody else has this particular thing, this particular way of doing the work. So he was able to increase his fee by pretty much 10 times with the same client.
Yeah, what's fascinating about that story is most of the time when I work with clients or companies, they're afraid to focus. And so if I take the law story, the lawyer story that you told, you've got a bunch of lawyers out there that are saying, "Well, I can do pretty much anything. I don't want to focus on that one specific thing." And as soon as I say, "Look, I'm really great at this one thing," that kind of implies I'm not great at everything else. Um, so what do you think of that?
I really, really strongly believe in focus. I have another client, a specialist PR firm, two very, very smart women. And they started off as a generalist PR firm and found it going quite hard. And then they specialized a bit and became a tech PR firm, and it got easier. And then they specialized a bit more and became an enterprise technology PR firm. And then they specialized again and became a pre-IPO enterprise technology firm. And she told me every time they specialized, things got easier. Because I think it's much easier to believe that someone is really good at something than it is to believe that someone is really good at everything. And then your marketing gets easier because you can if you like, I do LinkedIn ads. So if you want to run an ad that says, if consultancy or creative agency, are you frustrated with your pricing? Immediately people know whether they're in that camp or not. All your marketing gets so much easier. I could write a book about pricing for creative agencies and consultancies, which you said a few nice things about at the beginning. I would find it much more difficult to write a book about, how to improve any sort of business at any stage of its lifestyle. So I think that the specialism, I mean, I'll be honest, I resisted specialism at first, but I found, just like my client who I mentioned, every time I got more specialist, things got easier. The other thing to remember, of course, is that, it's not like the old days when your available market was how many clients lived within traveling distance of you. I deliver all my consulting now online. So my market is English speaking world. Except for Australia and New Zealand, that's just because of the 12-hour time difference makes things different. So, you know, you might think I'm quite specialized pricing for consulting and consultants and creative agencies, but according to LinkedIn, there are 240,000 people who are prospective clients for me.
Yeah, what's fascinating is I have friends who are pricing for accounting, and and not only that, but they have a very specialized niche within accounting, as in you want to learn to work less and make more money, I'll help you do that. Right? It's really fascinating that the more you can niche down, the easier it is to find your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Okay, so how do I make it look like I'm the only one? Um, is it have everything to do with this niche, or is there something else?
Well, there's the niche question, and then there's the way that you package and present what you do. So going back to the example of the 10 times increase, we went there from the thing being a collection of really quite complicated spreadsheets of analysis to being the 7 C's process. Another one of my clients, brand strategist, his process had 5 steps to it, and he was able to turn it into an acronym, CLEAR, CLEAR. Each of those standing for a particular step of the process. So you can
Yeah, but
make.
I want to push back on that a little bit, if I may. Right. So it doesn't matter which one. Let's talk clear because I could say clear easier than I could say 7 C's. So somebody walks in and says, "Hey, I have this clear program," and they say, "Well, what am I going to achieve with the clear program?" And maybe the answer to that is we're going to find new market segments where you can expand into. Great. So I have a clear program to help you find market segments. But I've got other consultants out there who tell me they can help me find new market segments. They don't use clear, but they have something else. But in the end, it's that what am I after? What am I trying to buy?
The other thing you can do with the framework, which is very powerful, is you can use it for proof. Now, I used to really struggle with this, and people would ask me questions along the lines of, "Well, how are you going to do it?" Which is a fairly reasonable question. But if you try to answer that question in a naive way, "Well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this," then it's a lose-lose situation, because either you do manage to explain yourself very convincingly, and then you've just told them exactly how to do the thing, and they might go away and do it themselves. Or if you can't, then you've just shot yourself in the foot. But what you can do with a framework is to say, okay, this is how we're going to do it, and this is the first step, and here are some examples of how the elements of the first step have produced results for businesses very similar to yours. And then we'll do the second step. And here are some examples of how the elements in the second step have produced results for businesses very similar to yours, and so on with the third step, and on to the fourth and the fifth. So it sets you apart partly by making you look different because no one else has got this particular way of doing it. But it also really helps you answer the question of, well, how do I know you're going to deliver the goods?
Yep. Okay, so let's say let's talk about pricing consultants for a second. This will be fun, right? So as a pricing consultant, someone can walk into a $1 billion corporation and say, essentially, look, if we could just improve your pricing 1%, we just made you $10 million.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shouldn't you pay me $1 million for that? And he goes, well, I appreciate the $10 million, but there's a consultant out there that'll do this for 100K. Why
Mm,
why would I pay you $1 million?
yes. That is the point of setting yourself apart. The reason they would pay you $1 million, and I'll be candid, maybe $1 million as against 100,000 might be too much of a stretch. Let's say you would like to be paid 200,000 as compared to a competitor who would do it for 100,000. So they would go with you. Um, Main reason they would choose you is because they saw you as being more likely to produce the result. Because we're making these we're making these promises. We're selling the intangible in the words of a quite well known book. So we have got to think quite hard about how we persuade people that we can actually do the work. So they would probably go for you if they felt that you were more likely to produce the results, or likely to produce a better result. There are also other things which we talk about, like my clients and me. So did some work recently with a brand strategist, and his thing is he's got a big consumer brand, maybe a food product, and they've spent £100,000 on market research, which has given them a huge amount of data which needs to be interpreted. So it's one thing to have a huge amount of data. It's another thing to say, okay, this is what we need to be doing. This is the sort of thing that might work. This is the sort of thing that probably won't work. So his job is to go through this data and turn it into an action plan. And his difference is not the end result, the action plan. He's a very good brand strategist, but there are other good brand strategists out there who will produce an action plan that's probably very similar. His difference is that he will do it in a way so that every contact he has with anyone in the client, he's not just understanding, analyzing the situation, he's also getting buy-in. So if I'm his client, I know there's a big difference between being presented with a plan, which nobody else really believes in, and all the arm twisting and the persuasion and the negotiations and the wrangling that I need to get that plan implemented. Whereas if I go with Matt, he's done that work for me. So I get a plan, but I also get something extra. I get a much, much faster and much easier implementation. And then we actually put a figure on it. He reckons for the client, that amounts to half a day a week that they can spend on their other priorities. So
Yep.
for the you know for the I tend not to get that sort of implementation issue because I work with companies where I'm dealing with the owner and they're relatively small. If you're dealing with, if we're dealing with billion-dollar corporations, then, we know and they know that actually getting people to change the way they do things is very hard work.
Yep.
It's probably the
Yep.
most important thing.
Yeah, Alistair, fascinating, by the way, but I want to change topics because I'm really fascinated, and I almost always ask my guests nowadays about AI. And in your thought, in your world, you're in a unique position because you're working with a bunch of consultants out there. And I got to say, in the consulting world today, everybody's terrified that AI is going to take their job away. Or even if it's not going to take it away, people are going to try to use AI before they hire us, and so it slows down us. It makes it harder for us. So, what do you think about AI and this whole world of consulting and creative space?
Yes, I think about it a lot. Um, I think the first thing I would say is think very, very carefully about how your increasing use of AI is going to work with your existing pricing model. Because if you are using AI to get things done quicker, and I remember one of my clients telling me, pretty much everything he does, everything he needs, every time he needs to write something, he will start out with an AI draft. My wife develops legal training materials. She said she had to produce some materials. She used AI for the first draft. So if you are using it to reduce costs, then if you have a cost plus pricing model, it will kill you.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is yeah. I mean, I got this from my wife, who's she's a member of the California bar still from a previous career as a litigator in LA, and she pointed me to an opinion from the American Bar Association on the use of AI, and it's very, very clear. Obviously, there are rules for using it and for supervising it, but they say you cannot charge your clients for the time spent learning how to use AI. Which means and some big law firms, they've invested a lot of money in training their associates, training their partners to supervise it, proprietary AI systems and everything, just so that instead of charging 100 hours of associate time each hour with its profit margin, they can now charge the client half an hour for putting some proofs and prompts into their AI. So that clearly, this might finally be the final thing that persuades lawyers to get away from the concept of the billable hour. But it's going to be an issue for an awful lot of people. If you are using it to reduce cost, then you have got to have a model which doesn't hand all that cost saving over to your client. Otherwise,
Yep.
you'll just cost saving your way out of business. I also suggest that it, the old saying, better, faster, cheaper, choose any two.
Yep.
And a lot of truth in that. But I think AI can potentially change that trade off. So you could, in fact, thanks to AI, have better and cheaper and faster. And I
Yeah.
think
So I use AI a lot just to talk to about my ideas and hone some ideas. How do you use AI for your business?
I am probably a relatively late adopter. I find it useful for getting a handle on the market and where people are. So I will ask it questions like, what are the main reservations that people have about value-based pricing? That was very helpful.
Yeah.
I asked it to explain to me the principles of value-based pricing, not because I felt I needed help in that area, because I think it's a good way of getting a sense of where people currently are. And that was very reassuring because it confirmed my suspicion that pretty much all the value-based pricing discussion is about speaking more confidently about your value, which is step one. And there wasn't any mention of steps 2 and steps 3 of my process, which was reassuring because it gave me some comfort that I did in fact have something novel there. So that's probably where I've tended to use it.
Ni- Nice. Alistair, believe it or not, we are out of time. This has just flown by. But I am ask you the final question. What is one piece of pricing advice you'd give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
Whoa, where to start? If you are all right, I would say, and this is definitely for consultancies and creative agencies. You should consider seriously the possibility that you are 10 times as good as your competitors in at least part of what you do. And you should not rest until you have found a way of getting paid in accordance with that.
I love that. That is a great piece of advice. I'm going to go take that one myself. How's that?
Yes, too. Good, good.
Alistair, thank you so much for your time today. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
Okay. Well, they can track me down on LinkedIn. My parents had no idea about this in 1961, but they gave me the perfectly search engine optimized name. I'm the only Alastair Dryburgh on LinkedIn or on Google, so no problems finding me there. A better thing to do, though, would be to follow the link that you say you're going to put in the show notes, and you can get hold of a short, I think it's 10 or 12 page guide on the process and how it works, and you can start thinking about how you might apply it for yourself.
Yeah. What is that link?
It is alastair.com/guide.
Perfect. And we will put that in the show notes. So thank you so much, Alistair. And to our listeners, thank you. If you enjoyed this, would you please leave us a rating and a review? And if you have any questions or comments about the podcast, or if your company wants to get paid more for the value you deliver, email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact. Thanks again to Jennings Executive Search for sponsoring our podcast. If you're looking to hire someone in pricing, I suggest you contact someone who knows pricing people. Contact Jennings Executive Search.